So the next thing we're going to take off is this. Now here we've got Allen bolts in, which is very nice. If you've got the old screws in, what you really need is an impact wrench to get them out. Or at the very least, make yourself or buy a T-handle screwdriver so that you can really be pressing and getting some turn in them. But as I say, here we go. We'll get another little thing. And we'll keep our fingers crossed here. In fact, let's put a little something underneath. Just in case there's some oil in there still. I set things to drain, left them for a couple of days, and then bugger me, you take them apart and there's oil hidden somewhere that suddenly comes out and all over the bench, all over your boots, whatever. This one was sticking out the other side about an inch. Obviously somebody who put this in didn't own a hacksaw. And certainly didn't buy the right set of Allen bolts. Here's another one that's sticking right out the back. One of the nice little touches on this engine was they went to put in the alternator wires coming out the front instead of out the back or wherever. Triumphs are terrible for that. They not only come out the back, but there's a plate on the top here. It's murder to get at them. The A65s, A50s are like that as well. I can imagine what they would have been like to get out if they were just a Phillips head. I would think you would have definitely needed an impact wrench for that. And they're not that expensive. It's like a lot of tools. If you only do jobs occasionally, then you can get away with buying a cheaper one. Although you will get scorn and derision from so-called real mechanics if you're not going to use something every day of your life, then you don't really need the durability of the expensive tools. If they'll work a few times, they might last you for as long as you ever need them. And that goes for things like your welders and all the rest of it. Yes, it would be nice if we could all get the very best commercial grade, but as we're not switching it on at 8 o'clock in the morning and switching it off at 5, as long as it does what it's supposed to do, that's good enough. Bit like me, really. I know what I'm doing, but I start to flag a little bit by lunchtime. Okay, now let's see if this has been... Oh, well, bugger me, look at that. Probably doesn't have a gasket in the top. There you go. Stuck on the dowel at the front. Yeah, definitely taken everything out. There it goes. Yeah, can you see that? Just think at some point somebody was riding round with that. We'll leave that in there till we clean that out. And we will get... What did I do with that piece of cloth? Of course, I know what I've done with it. There it is. So I've been off and got ourselves a bit of this stuff. There we go. Right. Oh! Well, that wouldn't rattle, that's for certain. Alright, next thing we're going to do is we're going to take the clutch cover off here, the outer cover, take the plates out, and then we'll take this nut off and the nut off the centre and go from there. So this is what you're going to need to know if you had to replace a chain or if you're doing clutch plates. What we need is a nice big screwdriver, excuse me. Now you can get proper little tools for these, or as with the T1, if you've got a biggish screwdriver laid around, you can always just grind a notch in the centre to go on. But here they're proud of the actual pin, so we can just use a big screwdriver. Again, we're going to replace, there's the nut, there's the spring, and then there's a cup that goes in there. Sometimes they'll come straight out, sometimes they won't. We're going to be completely rebuilding this clutch, so there'll be new springs, new plates, everything. So, first thing, oh, this is really stuck. This hasn't been apart for a while. So there is the clutch plate. The cups do come out. There we go. And the clutch cup has a little notch on it. I don't know if you can see that. And then there's a little piece there cut out for it to fit in so that the cup doesn't turn around in operation. Now let's see what we can get out. Actually, the plates aren't too badly worn, but we are putting new ones in. Oh. Now the plates, you see, are stuck together, so they're trying to pull out en masse. So what we might be able to get them out with really stuck in. What we need is a little hooked implement. There we go. And there you see these have come out stuck together. And where did this clutch plate come from? Looks like it's a cork plate. Amazing what you find inside some of these bikes. Why people can't just buy the right parts instead of making things and strange. Actually looks as if somebody stuck those cork pieces of cork on there, because the other side is the fibre. Well, fortunately it's not going to be a concern because we're going to throw them away. Now then, in here we have a lock washer as well with two tangs. So let's get a screwdriver, fold all these lock washers over, and then we're going to use an impact wrench to take these off. If you don't have an impact wrench, then you've got to hold the clutch. And you can buy clutch holding tools, or you get yourselves your old clutch plates, a friction plate and a driven plate, and you weld a handle on. It can either weld them together or just bolt them together. Then that will go in there and it will locate the clutch centre and the outer and stop everything from moving. So you can then turn the nut, everything like that. But believe me, a torque wrench is much better. I just noticed here, look, there's one of these screws missing. That one's loose and the end is, they've all been had a go at. So we've got all sorts we're going to have to buy. If you have a C15T or like a T100, something like that, with the old energy transfer system on, and you want to uprate it to better ignition, you can fit an encapsulated 12 volt alternator and then one of those little electronic gubbinses to generate enough power for the ignition system. I did that on a C15T and could not understand why I couldn't get spark, or it was very intermittent. What it is although the new encapsulated stator fits straight on, the ET rotor is slightly smaller than this one. Not much, but enough to make the air gap between the two big enough so that you're not getting enough power generated, or it's hit and miss. And I put the original rotor back on because it was it was the strong magnets. I thought it would be fine, and I couldn't understand why I couldn't get a proper spark. And then I was going to try another rotor, just in case I'd been wrong about the magnetism, and when I had them in my two hands I realised one was bigger than the other. So you've got to match up stator and rotor if you do that. Alright, what we're going to do now is flatten over, oh bang, crash wallop, the two lock washers. This one's already done. The clutch one has two tabs on it. Now you can use an impact wrench if you have one. And Let me pick up my safety glasses, which I just knocked down, because if you're using an impact wrench, there's always a chance things will break. Preferably use the impact sockets because they're a lot stronger. But we're not using hundreds of pounds on these, so you can get away with the ordinary ones at a pinch. There we go. Let's see what we've got this second. Oh, we can up that a bit. But this seems to be on good and tight. Good and tight isn't in it. Might have to put a bit of heat on that. Let's see if the clutch one will come off. Now, a pair of gloves might have been a good idea there, but to be honest, when you use these, it hardly moves the other part. That's what makes them so good. Now, what we're going to do is, I think we'll put a little bit of heat on that, just to see if we can get it going. And we can take out these bits. There's a lock washer, then there's this thick spacer. Take them out, put them into our little box of clutch bits. We're going to pull the clutch push rod out because we're going to use an extractor in there and we don't want it pressing on the end of the push rod. So that goes into our little box of bits. We're going to pull this off, the centre comes out, and then when I can get this off, we'll be able to do the rest of it. So I'm going to switch you off while I heat this up, save a little bit of time. Need a little bit of heat, not too much, just with a propane torch. And also, I'm using the line from out of my paint room, which is next door, and I'd forgotten to up the pressure on it. So let's just check to see if it was because we didn't have enough air pressure. Well, will you look at that? If only I had a brain. Okay. There's that. All goes in with that clutch side stuff. I'll get the nut out of there later on. So now the next thing is we take these three off here. That will come off, and then we'll take that off. Okay. Where are we? So, next thing is these. Then the stator will pull off. we will be discarding this completely because the PVL replaces the alternator altogether. So put that to one side. I'm getting mucky on this job. Now then, rotor pulls off, and put this inside the stator so that it acts as a keeper for the magnets. Now the rotor is keyed on, but the PVL rotor isn't. They won't come out like that. Tap them down at one end. That isn't quite up to the job. Where are we? Here we go. There we go. Ooh. Everything's really bunged in this with the oil that was used, because it had been left so long. All the wax and what have you really bunged things up. Very gummy. That out. Just going to keep it. Now then, you see these two holes in the sprocket? They're actually drilled and tapped, and there is an extractor, which is a sort of bar that goes on, two bolts that go into that, and then it will pull it off. But you can pull it off with a two-legged puller. Whoa. How sticky isn't in it. There it comes. This is obviously the chain tensioner. So what we'll do is we'll loosen the clutch end first, and then we'll put a puller on this to pull it off. Alright, what have I done with it? There it is. It is possible to get this off without a puller, but it is not easy, and there's a good chance of you damaging the clutch cage. So the pullers are cheap enough. It just screws into the centre of there. And this centre screws in, and what size is that? Now, one little piece of information here: the clutches on these BSAs don't have a caged roller in them. They have 25 separate little rollers, and if when you're pulling the clutch off, the clutch centre comes away from the clutch cage, those rollers will very likely fall out. And it's most disconcerting if you don't realise they're there and you're doing this, and all of a sudden you hear this tinkling sound, and when you look down there's all these shiny little rollers on the floor. So bear that in mind. Sometimes these pull straight off and sometimes they don't. As you could hear, that one broke loose. So there's our clutch loose. Now, because this is an endless chain, these two have got to come off together. So now, these sprockets aren't on, or they shouldn't be on, too tightly. so this will generally pull them off. Slightly cockeyed because on one side you're underneath the sprocket, on the other side you're underneath the chain. But 16mm, there it is. And in fact this one's just coming straight off. So there we go, no problem at all. That's coming off, that's coming off. So you see, you just work them a little bit. Oh, come on. There it is. And off comes your clutch. Now sometimes, as in this case, there might be a shim behind it in order to get that chain line right. You can see what's being left in there. So keep the shim, particularly if you're putting everything else back on, because it'll keep things lined up. But we're going to put a different sprocket on here, so we might not need that shim. Alright, let's put this nasty oily thing out of the way as well. Now as you see, there's a key in here also. Come on now. Gap at the back there, maybe we can get underneath it. Here it comes. I mean, these should be a reasonable fit, but these are just simply gummed in. See what can we pop that out with. Might be able to pull it out with a pair of pliers, you never know. Oh, here it comes, here it comes. Oh, dear me. It's going to be popped all the way out. Alright, last thing to take off on this side is this cover for the sprocket. So, screwdriver, smaller blade. Now these screws have a very small slot in them, so you've got to make sure the screwdriver fits well. You've got plenty of pressure on it, or you'll just ruin the slots. can use an impact screwdriver for these. Which is very often the best way to do it. Too big a bit. That looks better. Yes. They're not really in tight, it's just that they're such a nasty little head. The slot is not very deep and it's only thin, so you can't get a good sized screwdriver onto it. But the least little jolt generally will get it started. More often than not, I end up having to replace at least a couple of these because they've just got so damaged trying to get them off. Oops, do it with Phillips, can I? No, we didn't get that one. Put this up against the wall. This is a nasty head altogether. Ooh, is it? That might be right. There we go. And there we go with that. Now the very last thing we can get at on this side is to take this this nut off there. So we've got a lock washer on it, and this nut very often isn't that tight because it's not so much holding the sprocket on as just stopping the sprocket from sliding on the shaft. You know, some bikes there'll actually only be a circlip holding that on because of course all the pressure is in this direction because of the chain pulling on it. It's not actually in this direction. So did I get it out? No, I did not. Excuse me while I go in here for special tools. Special tool, dual purpose. It's a 1.5 inch socket. It fits that, and it also fits the nuts on the top of the forks. So I made this up because it has this long piece here. So what I've done is I've taken a socket and put it in the lathe and turned the centre out so that this would fit all the way up. Put a bit of tube on with a place for a crossbar, and that will take it off. But what we also need to do is to hold the sprocket. So for that, appropriate size chain, fastened into a little handle. You can just jam something in, of course, but wow, you should see the way the teeth on that sprocket are hooked. So this goes around. Usually this is one of those things where you put it on the wrong way around first time. See, that's not even on tight. That comes off. The big tab washer comes off the other side. Bingo. No, I don't know. Some white. Now look at that. Can you see the hook on those teeth? They are worn. They've had it. So that can go over there out of the way. So there we are. That side completely completed. And as you can see, we're starting to run out of space for tools now. I can't get over that. That is horrible, isn't it? Okie doke. Let's turn you around. Now we